Okay, so first of all, I want to thank you for this invitation. I'm flattered and to tell you the truth, I'm overwhelmed. So I want to start off by saying that the subject is so vast and events are changing so rapidly that I don't think anyone can have profound insights about what is going to happen now or what will happen. And I think people or groups who claim to have these insights, either implicitly or explicitly, are either self-delusional or dissembling. So I think that the most that we can expect of ourselves, and what I think everyone here will agree, is a world historic moment, something we have not seen in our lifetimes, is to acknowledge and live with the uncertainties and to decide how to intervene as best we can, based on the best knowledge we can gather, analyzed with scrupulous objectivity and guided by our principles. And that's what I'm going to try to do. I want to start off by saying what those principles are. The starting point for me, always, is a commitment to thoroughgoing democracy as the sine qua non of human liberation through socialism, which is the alternative to capitalism's barbarism, and a rejection that this ideal of socialism from below and the need for democracy is impossible because no existing state or social system lives up to our ideal. I reject that. I think these concepts together comprise a restatement of the third camp, which was articulated in the rationale of the formation of the Workers' Party and subsequently the ISL in differentiating itself from the Trotskyists. So the ideal of the third camp, I think, is for me my guiding principle. So I think that what I want to talk about is I'm going to answer the questions. I'm going to use the questions to try to make sense of what is occurring in the US today in the labor movement and on the streets. And I want to briefly frame that, though, by saying that there were two black swans. There have been two black swans. The first black swan was the crisis in capitalism before the pandemic. So the pandemic is intensifying and exposing the crisis in capitalism that existed before, right? And it's very important that we use that as our starting point for understanding what's happening now, because I think that informs the question about who to support in the election and how we look at the election and what we should be demanding of the working class and of the unions and of the populace. So we have two black swans. We have one was the crisis of capitalism and the other is the coronavirus, right? Two, separate but related. Obviously, I can't analyze both. But so what I want to talk about is I want to combine those two by discussing the fact that the protests right now, I think there are a few things that make it extraordinarily important. The first thing is that these are protests about police brutality directed at the Black community. That's what these protests are about. While the pandemic has inflamed those conditions, the protest is about police brutality. And we should understand the police role as being enforcing the rule of capitalism and the ruling class. And what is extraordinary in the coverage in this country, in the liberal media, is that that connection has been made. In my lifetime, we have never seen that connection made before by liberals. And so this is something entirely new. These protests are not a repeat of what we saw in the 60s or the 70s with riots in the cities. It is not. And these protests are also different. The protests are also different because the resistance is multiracial. And in the 60s, the eruptions in the cities, the riots, the so-called riots, were by Black people. The white student movement, the white anti-war movement was completely isolated from those protests. And that is no longer the case. And that is a remarkable change that we have to note. I want to show people this thing from Twitter. I want to point out, I want you to look at this tweet. And I think that anybody, I see that Althea is in the, my colleague and comrade Althea is in the room, and Barry is in the room. For anybody who lived through the riots in the 60s, in the United States in the 70s, this tweet is absolutely remarkable to see. It is a video in Atlanta of a police officer. It looks to me like the police officer is Asian American. That's what it looks to me. It's hard to tell because of, all the paraphernalia, the protective gear they're wearing. But he's trashing a Black woman who's just standing there yelling at him. He trashes her with his bike. He pushes his bike into her. And this petite white woman, we never saw this before in the United States. And one of the things that, what I want to point out here is that this is a multiracial movement, right? And Noam Chomsky said in the Democracy Now! Had an anti-inaugural presentation during Trump's inauguration, and he said, we cannot underestimate the potential of the changes in this country since the 60s, in the United States since the 60s. This country, the United States, has changed. It is, despite the persistence of racism and its aggravation and its intensification, something else has intensified as well. And that is that this is a multiracial society. And young people are raised in a different country, in a different society now. The country has changed. Okay, so what does that mean for us? I want to say what I think that means for us as socialists. I think what this means for us as socialists is that one of the most important tasks we have in the United States, and I actually think this is, I'd like to hear what people think about it vis-a-vis the UK and the way the UK understands the colonial, the issue of colonialism and racism in Brexit. So I've been reading a lot of historians, of US historians who are looking at the formation of the US working class. And one person whose work I especially appreciate is Dave Roediger. And Roediger argues that Marxists have, in the United States, and I think internationally, have separated the process of class formation from racism. That is the ideology of white supremacy. And he says that omitting racism's break on working class struggle under capitalism ends up missing the importance of both race and class. And I think that Roediger is exactly right. That what we're seeing now in the protests is extraordinarily exciting and important because it represents the opportunity for socialists, for revolutionaries to intervene in the working class, in the white working class, and to say that this is a struggle we must support. We absolutely must support this struggle, and we cannot support it simply through words. We have to support it through mobilizations. Perhaps some people have seen the video clips of transit workers in cities refusing to transport the protesters who have been arrested. I don't know if people have seen that. That's the kind of solidarity that we have not seen. We saw it in Occupy. We saw some of it in Occupy, but you know, the Transport Workers Union, if we also look at the Transport Workers Union, it's a union that is on the left of the labor movement, certainly far to the left of the building trades. But I think that these protests offer us an opportunity to create a cleavage in the unions, and a cleavage that opens the space for multiracial struggle of the sort that we haven't seen since the communists organized in the CIO. So that's how I'm looking at these protests. Now, of course, I would be remiss and romanticizing it if I didn't talk about the horrible militarization of the police that has occurred since the Obama administration. I mean, the savagery of the repression of these demonstrations is horrifying and really remarkable. And this is really, I think, these demonstrations and these protests in this context raise the slogan of race war or class war. That's what this is about now, race war and class war. And how are we going to intervene to pull the working class, the white working class, to class war? Now, of course, Bernie Sanders has done some of this work for us through his campaign. And that's a good, a lot of those people are in the streets now. A lot of those young people are in the streets, and I'm hopeful about that. Okay, I said I was going to take 20 minutes, so I want to answer just two last questions, just two last things. One is about the US election, who to support. I think the vice president is meaningless. It's clear to me from the way that the squad, you know, the Democrats further down on the line, the way that they've collapsed into Biden's campaign. You know, AOC is on a task force. They've been defanged. They've been defanged. And that's the history of the Democratic Party, right? So I think the way, and I've learned this from some young people that I'm in touch with on Twitter. One of them, who I'm crazy about, he's an activist from the Chicago Teachers Union. He posted something on Facebook and he said, "I'm not voting for Biden, and I'm also not arguing about it on social media." And that's exactly how I feel. That is an argument, that is a debate we are not going to win. That debate is a diversion. The question is, how are we going to build an electoral alternative so that in 4 years we are not in the same spot? That, to me, is the question. What are we going to do so that we are not in the same spot in 4 years? So a question that I will have, a debate that I will have with people is it meaningful to organize support for progressive Democrats further down on the ticket? Or the Jacobin is calling for a dirty break. Andrew Sertinger has a piece in New Politics Online about how we might understand that dirty break from the Democrats. That's what I want to talk about. That's what I want to think about. Because Biden stands for the same policies that brought us here. He stands for exactly those same policies that brought us here. He has no ideas. He has no vision. He's already contacted all the architects of the economic reforms that Obama put in office after he was elected, demoralizing an entire generation, right? So that's a dead end. And I think that the argument that some people, that Katha Pollitt made, for instance, about Biden, it's very revealing. So Katha Pollitt said she would vote for Biden even if he boiled babies and ate them. That's what Katha Pollitt wrote. What does that mean? What's the meaning of that position? That's the position, the meaning of that position is that we have no program for struggle. We have no program for struggle. None. Our program is electing Biden, and my program is not electing Biden. Because I know that Biden is not going to do anything different from Obama. And Obama's reforms are not going to solve the economic crisis that we have now in the United States. The last thing that I want to say in my 30 seconds left is that, one of the things that's remarkable is the difference in the way the ruling class in the EU, the way the ruling class all over the world treated this pandemic, right? And the US ruling class is willing to tolerate conditions that spark revolutions elsewhere in the world. That's what's so incredible. The unemployment figures in this country it's probably far higher than the 30% that they're reporting, because a lot of people don't even qualify for unemployment. We probably have an unemployment rate of 40%, and that is going to continue. And the Republican Party, which is propping up Trump, will not budge on that. They're unwilling to budge. So that's what I want to say. Oh, you know what? Let me just grab 2 more minutes. With very few exceptions, the unions, organized labor in this country has not stepped up in these protests. It remains to be seen if they will. The transit workers is an exception, but it remains to be seen what's going to happen with the other unions. And I have to say, I am not optimistic about that.